The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. I'm Jim Conway, the Marketing Director at DemandChain, and on behalf of our entire team, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Salesforce Integration Projects. Set yourself up for success. Our host for today's session is DemandChain's Andy Boettcher. Andy's our Chief Technology Officer and Chief Innovation Officer, and he's been with us for over a decade. Andy is a Salesforce MVP, a distinction held by only about 250 people worldwide. But the most important element is he has over 25 years of extensive integrations experience. He truly is an expert on the topic. Andy will be joined later in the session by two DemandChain clients who will share their experiences about their integration projects. They are Joyce Lizzie from the National Food Lab and Mark Herring from North American Composites. I'd like to welcome them. Before diving in, a few housekeeping notes. First, all attendees are in listen-only mode. We have reserved time at the end to answer questions you may want to pose Andy or our client guests. If you do have a question, please submit it via the questions pane located on the right of your screen. We'll collect those and ask them later in the session. Second, we will be recording today's session and we'll email you a link to the recording later today in case you'd like to revisit it or share it with colleagues. And finally, that same email will include a link to a short survey about today's session. We'd greatly appreciate your feedback. And with that, I will turn it over to Andy.
Thank you, Jim. And thank you to all of our attendees today for attending our webinar on integrations. Before we get to the main content, I'd like just to take a moment and talk about our company, DemandChain, specifically about that depth of our experience and focus on customer success. In our 20-year history, we've completed over 1,200 projects, and most of those projects do involve some sort of integration in one way, shape, or another, whether it's a quick data connection to QuickBooks for invoicing, or enabling a large-scale multi-system process integration to support point of sale, ERPs, digital transformation, and the sort. We have always had a very tight focus on ensuring the quality of our work and achieving the successful outcomes of that work. Over the last 18 months, we've really put our money where our mouth is, actually investing in your success with our formalized customer success program. Leading the charge with a team of over 180 certifications, decades of CRM and integration experience, and a formal program to measure and ensure that you're seeing the right outcomes is how we can bring webinars like this to you. A quick high-level look at the popular systems and tools that DemandChain is integrated with Salesforce. You can see our heavy manufacturing experience with those ERP systems listed on the left, the range of data, virtual, and process-enabling platforms we've deployed in the middle, and a small sample of some third-party providers over on the right. So, for today's webinar, my goal is for you all to walk away with a common framework for how DemandChain looks at integrations, questions you should be asking yourself before starting on an integration journey, questions a partner like DemandChain should be asking you, and then focusing on why good integrations are important and some main reasons that some of the best intentioned integrations fail. I also want you to hear directly from two of our customers, Mark from North American Plastics and Joyce from the National Food Lab, on their experiences, not so much in the technical details, but how good integrations have impacted their businesses, enabled growth, and honestly, brought a little fun to the table to boot. So, integrations is a wide definition. It can mean a simple point-to-point connection to a back-end database, or again, something like QuickBooks for invoicing. It can also range up to a large multi-system complex architecture involving ERP, point of sale, marketing, a single or multiple Salesforce instances, heck, even flat files. Those of us who have been around the ecosystem for a while, there's a lot of things that we need to connect to in the real world. Getting data moving from your business systems into Salesforce, getting new information from Salesforce back to those business systems improves the overall value of Salesforce in your investment. It improves the value of those connected systems, and in your organization, it raises the value as a whole. The way that DemandChain thinks about integrations isn't about the technology alone. It's how you enrich your business systems with Salesforce data and vice versa. Again, integration is a wide definition. I think I could talk for 2 straight days really getting into the weeds of really what integrations are and getting into the technical details. From an architectural planning perspective for today, DemandChain will break each integration down into 3 focuses. And I'm going to illustrate that with the analogy of planning a bus route. To get people from point A to point B on a road, you need a good solid road over there on the platform that's properly sized to the type of buses, that model in the middle, that'll be traveling on the road. And that road and those buses need to support the schedule or cadence that those buses will be running on. After we work with you to establish what the business outcomes and goals are, we focus first on the platform or the road. How many lanes do we need to plan for? Is this a one-way or two-way street? How crazy do we really need to get here? If I have a town of 100 people and all I'm trying to do is to get to the grocery store and the bowling alley, I don't need a 6-lane highway, right? Similarly, if your business is looking to go through perhaps a digital transformation effort over the next 2 or 3 years, we know you might eventually need maybe a 4-lane highway with an express lane. We want to take that kind of stuff into account now. After that, then we move to the model or the types of buses that are going to be traveling on the road. Do I need a 6-seater bus just to get the community group to bingo? Or do I need a king coach to take everyone to the casino? Finally, we look at the cadence or the schedule. How often are people going to be driving vehicles on the road? Do we need people to be able to be picked up every 5 minutes? Maybe just daily? Or does a bus always need to be waiting for somebody at any point during the day? All of these come together to form an integration strategy. Now, I know for some of you on the call, you're already asking questions. You're like, come on, Andy, it's a little more detailed than that. Like I said, integrations are a topic I could talk about all day. I'd love to talk to you more about this either one-on-one or at a future webinar. Let me know in the Q&A if you'd like to circle back here on this. Okay. Now you know how DemandChain thinks about integrations. Now, before we even start coming together, you need to have some real talk with your business. We classify these discussions across a number of areas: data and systems, user experience, technology, support, and growth. The actual question list is definitely a little more intense than you're seeing on the screen here today, but this slide showed you some of the big ones. Things like, what are we actually trying to do? Not technology-wise, right? That comes later, but what is our business actually trying to do? What experiences are we actually trying to elevate? Other items like, how are we going to budget for this? How are we going to support this after go live? One of my favorites personally, what are our collective assumptions? With this topic being so vast, many people have so many different ideas of how they've seen it in the past, of how they think it's going to go. Challenge your teams, have them write their assumptions down. You wouldn't believe how many integrations launch very well, but then eventually fade away because someone had a different idea of what was actually going to happen than what was rolled out. Think business and outcomes, not technology here. After you've talked with yourselves, you may decide to bring in an integration partner, such as DemandChain. We're going to come in and validate and challenge your answers and bring a lot of our own questions. Some questions such as, are you prepared for a possible phased approach? Sometimes, I think the adage is we don't want to boil the ocean. Sometimes we have to get it warm, but we definitely don't want to boil it. So we may come back and say, are you guys prepared for a possible phased approach? We'll dig down deep. And how do we connect to your systems? This is where we, like I said, dive really deep. We take your outcomes, your assumptions, and your technical details to build that architecture. And I'll have to say, I looked at the previous slide and I called out my favorite. My favorite on this slide here, let's get above the project for a minute itself. What is your business looking to do in the next few years? Under that growth item at the far right. Knowledge now, we don't need to know specifics, but knowledge now can mean rapid acceleration of those plans in the future instead of staring at a large amount of tech debt or rework in the future. Now, I know I laughed a little myself when I made this slide. Of course, good integrations are critical. That title, I stared at that for a while and figured out a better way to say that, but no, this is actually pretty good. But really, what is a good integration? The technology really isn't it. Integrations that focus on your customer, their user experience, and truly the how is what makes a good integration. Your customer doesn't really care about the depth of your information. They only care about you solving their need quickly. It doesn't matter if you have all of the data possible to answer a question if it takes 10 minutes, 17 clicks, and a return phone call to do it. The best why and the wrong how can destroy user confidence. And honestly, it can impact adoption pretty hard. If you don't focus here, you kind of get what you get. Garbage in, garbage out. All right. In my 25 years of technology, I've seen a lot of great integrations, some decent ones, and a lot of really bad ones. Our approach is designed to bring as much transparency and prep to some common failure points. Errors happen, your users don't give you the full story, or even a stakeholder that didn't get the chance or didn't take the chance to voice up during design. We strive to bring this all up proactively so we don't have to bring it up reactively later. I want you all on the call here to look at these 7 items here. And for those of you who have been involved in integration projects, I'll bet you money that you're at least looking at one of them and smirking at the screen right now, right? Okay, setup complete. On to the main event. Hearing firsthand from our customers. First up today, Mark Herring, Account Manager with North American Composites. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. Would you like to introduce yourself to our attendees?
Sure, thanks for having me. My name is Mark Herring. I am an account manager with North American Composites. Recently switched over onto the sales side, but spent the first 20 years of my career in IT, and was the project manager of our CRM project that we partnered with DemandChain on, I guess back in late 2019.
Yep. Awesome. Mark, thank you. Like you said, we started our journey back together in late 2019. Now, the need you came to us with was rather unique. I have up on the screen here kind of the corporate structure that IP Corp has. You were moving a very established business with many manual processes and separate ERPs together. Can you tell us quickly about the IP Corp North American Composites umbrella and a little bit about what your company does and how it led up into this?
Sure. Yeah, so I guess my previous role, I was working for IP Corporation in their IT department. Now I am with NAC on the sales side. So that's one of, we've got this parent corporation and then a number of child companies underneath the parent corporation. I guess back in 2019, we were really just looking to modernize our business. A couple big sales related projects were green lighted. We first did an e-commerce B2B project, and then we did a big CRM project, which we're discussing today. We decided to go with Salesforce and partnered with DemandChain, and I launched right into our project. The big thing with us is we were kind of behind the times in terms of CRM. We did not have a CRM system in place. So really the main drivers for us was just modernizing our whole sales organization and just some of the basics, just data retention, trying to address the main thing of, when somebody left the organization or retired, they had all this knowledge accumulated in their head and would take that with them to the door. So that was really the two main drivers, just trying to, get a CRM system in place and try and start addressing some of those gaps.
Thanks, Mark. So for the attendees on the call here today, to kind of tie back what Mark and I are talking about from the what is integration information from earlier, The pattern we use with IP Corp to address some of these, and Mark and I will go a little deeper here in a minute, but the pattern we used was a series of batch data feeds from multiple ERP systems. You see across the bottom, we have, there we go. We had, oops, one too many, sorry about that. We have multiple ERP systems across the multiple companies. Adds an interesting piece of complexity, right? So what we did is we leveraged a technology called DBAMP. We worked with Mark and his people to understand what they were great at and how they were going to fund and support an integration going forward. We found a common thread between the ERP systems and leveraged a technology called DBAMP. We were able to bring a single Salesforce instance, enrich that instance with the information from multiple ERP systems, maintaining the separate threads back to those ERP systems. We're able to break down undesired company and process silos while still enforcing certain competitive silos that were necessary to keep in place. So at a high level, Mark, I kind of touched on a few pieces setting up this slide here, but the business need that drove that project, why don't we dive back into that a second in your words?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, modernization of just our organization and just that data retention. You know, on the previous slide, our challenge was we had, these 4 subgroups. Actually, at the time it was 3. We've since bought another company, HK Research. But we had between those 3, child companies, we had 2 different Infor ERP systems in place, and so we just kind of did one project at a time. Got those integrations in place with DBAMP, which was a great tool, very nice from a development standpoint. Kind of allowed our developers to query directly in and set up those integrations pretty smoothly, with being able to kind of directly query into I don't know what you call like pseudo Salesforce tables via so that was great, great tool to work with. And really, yeah, we just kind of did project by project. So our first project with our Adage ERP system. Second project was Interplastic. They're using M3, another Infor ERP platform. And third was Molding Products. And they're also using Adage at this point. I think the main goal is to get over to M3 across the board, but yeah, really the integration, it just allowed us to bring data that was not very accessible right through to Salesforce in a nice presentable format, kind of focused around the customer. And really that's kind of, as far as kind of the value that it's added to us, really has allowed us to collaborate pretty effectively between groups within our business, kind of around that singular view of the customer.
Gotcha. You have something pretty specific though that makes it really unique, and those of you who are on the webinar, Mark has a really interesting perspective that I wanted to bring in this as well. Because Mark, you've been talking about the project piece so far, but your role actually has moved a bunch since we worked on this project together.
Yeah.
You were a project manager, right? And you were a project manager at IP Corp at the top side, and we were working together to phase our implementation and handle your change management. We were slowly bringing your organization through to that modernization piece that you talked about. When we concluded the projects or took the pause toward the end here, you moved into a different role as a sales rep down in the North American Composites business, and now you're using the solution that you help bring to bear for the companies. That's really unique, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And in hindsight, as a new sales rep for NEC, I honestly don't know what I would do without Salesforce. I mean, there's just so much good data right there at your fingertips. I'd be lost without it. I mean, I don't know what sales reps did previously without a CRM system.
Right.
Basic information, but I mean, addresses, contacts. I mean, all of just your basic order info, pricing. I mean, you name it. And absolutely, I mean, I guess my perspective has changed. hardly a day goes by where I'm not finding something where I'm like, boy, it'd be really nice to pull this piece of information off this report that we're doing manually on a daily basis and, pull that into the customer record.
So with that perspective, so you hit on one big one. You're now looking at the reports, and you're a consumer of this data. What advice would you give another organization with that perspective you have now? Organizations looking to elevate their customer experience through this type of shared data. What's some advice you may give people?
Yeah, I would. I guess there's probably not too many companies that were in our situation where we did not have a CRM system in place. But I guess just stepping back, I'd say just get into it. Take kind of bite-size pieces of the project. We took an approach on our project of crawl, walk, run. So we just got into it and started pushing through the project. And it went really well. It was a very successful project. But, kind of through this iterative approach, partnering with DemandChain, using sprints, we would just kind of start getting into it. And I guess the whole concept of a sprint, you're putting up, something for people to start testing and playing with. And I think that was a big part of our success. Until people can see it, they don't actually start getting it. And we didn't let kind of the perfection get in the way of our progress. And so, we got a very good initial product in our rollout, via those kind of agile methodology and, doing these sprints. But that nobody had it in mind that whatever we went live with on day one was going to be what we used going forward. It was always, let's get it in place, start using it, and then we'll kind of start, making refinements and improvements after the fact. That's really the approach we took.
Awesome. Mark, thank you so much for your time today. This was an incredible project that we were very fortunate to be able to partner with you on, and thank you for that partnership over the last 3 years.
Thank you.
All right, up next, we're going to talk with Joyce Lizzie, Senior Director of Consumer and Sensory Research for the National Food Lab. Thank you so much, Joyce, for joining us today. Would you like to take a few minutes and introduce yourself to our attendees?
For sure. Thanks for having me. As it says, I lead the Consumer and Sensory Research Services for the National Food Lab. So we do a lot of recruiting of normal, everyday consumers of food products and bring them in to do taste tests and other sort of usage tests with products. And I've been with the National Food Lab for about 8.5 years. So I was there from day one when we started our improvements of our system in partnership with DemandChain.
Awesome, Joyce. Thank you. To tie back to that what is integration information from earlier, the combined pattern that we used with the National Food Lab was a combo of multi-platform web services for rapid transfer of data, process, and virtual models to bring the data at the right place, at the right time, to the right person, in some batch for reporting, and near real time everywhere else to support that direct customer experience. Joyce, we started working together in 2015, and your business was in a very unique place. Can you talk a little bit about what the most pressing need your organization had when we started this journey together?
For sure, yeah. So the most pressing need was, we would field, when we do a taste test, we're needing to, have 100 people, 150 people, sometimes 200 people show up, on Friday between the hours of 9 to 8 p.m. And to get those 200 people identified, qualified, and scheduled takes a massive amount of outreach to the database and just coordination in terms of real time knowing of, okay, well, how many people have signed up for the session at 10 a.m. do we have room to take anyone more or not? And back then, it was still a very manual process. We did have some systems, but they weren't very well connected. And so it was very dependent on human communication and a lot of staff. We really needed to modernize that to, enhance the profitability of the business, to enhance our ability to meet our clients' expectations 100% every time, and to improve, the quality of the job for our employees as well.
I seem to remember back in 2015, I'm going to add a little bit of technical nerdery to this. That's a great setup, and that really speaks to the core of what we were trying to do when we started this journey. Now, my nerdy piece is I remember coming into your office and having a technology platform that was running under somebody's desk that we had to run around and reset a couple times a day, right? Right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yep. And really, that if you look at the screen for 1 second, everyone, that creating a multi-platform, seamless 24/7, 365 experience for respondents to qualify, schedule, and manage participation, as Joyce said, in those highly complex nationwide survey panels at a high rate of scale. And the last piece really throws an interesting piece into this across an uncontrolled, bring your own device approach. So Joyce, your respondents are on their cell phone at 2 in the morning, or at an office computer during the day, or at a home computer during the evening. You're using a lot of different ways to engage those people to come and come into qualify, schedule, and execute on those surveys. So an interesting enterprise level integration platform for this was critical, and we had not a lot of time to get it moving. We were hot to trot. Your business was moving forward at a high degree of change and a high rate, and we had to dive in. So enter the Salesforce platform as well as the AWS platform. Correct? Correct,
yes. And then the other key platform in all of that was our survey platform, right? Which we use a platform called Decipher. But those were 3 critical things to integrate: the CRM, the web interface that the consumers had, and then the survey platform that determined if they were qualified to participate or not.
Mm-hmm. It was best of breed systems for how your company needed to use them to interact with your individuals. That's what creates that opportunity for the integration. I remember talking about pulling things back into Salesforce, leaving them on the separate platforms, but we then at the end of the day came into the architecture I showed on the previous slide and having to activate that through this multi-platform seamless experience. So fast forward I think it was about a year or so before we launched. And I would say, and actually it doesn't matter what I say, Joyce, has this been an integration, and has this been a successful integration strategy for your business?
Oh my goodness, yes. So, but you said that was 2015. Hard to believe it's been that long. But, back then, just from a business perspective, right, we've gotten significantly more efficient. The recruiting team was well over 20 employees back then. It's down to 8. And, the cost per recruit was well over, $15 per person, and now it's well under $10 per person. So from a financial perspective, it's been great. From a job satisfaction perspective, it's been even better. Because the team has been able to focus on, okay, what are we going to do next? So a couple of years later, we introduced a kind of omni-channel platform. A couple of years after that, we launched an app, and then we introduced a financial model as well. So we've been able to build on this to continue to enhance our capabilities and continue to modernize, and continue to drive the business to be relevant today.
Mm-hmm. And one interesting piece of this, for those of you who have worked with DemandChain before, you know that we have some very core values we hold dear, and one of those is long-term engagement, long-term value, right? So I mentioned that Joyce and I started working back in 2015. we have worked together just about every single day appropriately. Don't take that the wrong way. We've worked about every single day together, right? All the way until I just learned that we just launched something last night. We launched the push notifications for your mobile apps last night.
Yeah.
So part of this whole journey is continually improving on the foundation that we've laid to continue to allow your organization to grow and unlock that future business potential. Joyce, if you could take a few minutes, some of that growth and future business potential, could you go a little more deeply into really what this integration platform's been able to enable for your business?
Yeah. So it's enabled us to grow. The core of it is so well integrated. Really it is self-service on the consumer or the research participant side. And so what we really start to think about is, okay, well, what additional data can we gather from the consumer that will create new revenue streams? How do we get better at mining that data in a more automated way? And then also it allows us to expand to new geographies. So we expanded the platform to California now about 4 years ago. We're looking to expand the platform to a new site in the Northeast in 2022. So the platform is just so well done that it enables us to add a lot of new products and services on top of it.
Excellent. This is, Mark's story and your story. Both of these are very near and dear to me personally. We've been able to really break down silos and let your businesses continue to grow and unlock that future business potential, right? So I get a little teary-eyed when I talk to both of you about this kind of stuff. One more question for you. If you think back to how we started and how we took you through those 10 questions for you, 10 questions for us. I know it was a while ago, and we kind of keep going through that. We have annual planning sessions. Of course, COVID kind of threw a little bit of a hiccup in that, but we really bring everyone together to every year, every period of time, to really engage together to bring awesome people with awesome ideas together. Can you talk a little about that experience and how DemandChain's helped you move forward with that?
Absolutely, yeah. So, and to your point, DemandChain is part of our team. So we have DemandChain, and then we also have our web platform, Boettcher, and their expertise. They're part of our team. So, you have Sophia on your side, and we have an account manager on the other side. They meet weekly with our kind of the person that uses this platform most, the one that leads our recruiting effort. And so we have daily conversations, and it's a great team on a daily operation perspective. But then also we get the pleasure of bringing in you and Morgan from Boettcher and others for, semi-annual or annual planning sessions. And I just think the caliber of the thinking whenever we get together and the creativity is really what has caused us to never stop innovating and to always find ways to take that next step of enhancement. It's not big dollars, but it's big reward in terms of either business efficiency or business growth.
Excellent. Joyce, thank you so much for your time today. Like I said, I always get a little teary-eyed talking about these, so thank you so much for your time today.
It's a feather in our cap. It's the thing that, we've been acquired a couple times, and it's a feather in our cap. We couldn't run our business without the platform and without your guys' partnership.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, one thing I'm going to bring up really quick is you had mentioned the partner. There's a third partner in the room as we're talking about stuff, and that partner was Boettcher. Yeah. One of the really exciting things that we bring to our customers is that we also have partners of our own that have specific expertise in certain areas that really make even so that 1 + 1 = 3 type of setup, right? So with our customers, we help bring those. That's what we did with Boettcher International Food Labs. So that's also one great piece that really contributes to a really nice solution. And I keep saying really nice solution because, again, I'm a little proud of both of these. So, so again, Joyce, thank you here for the time today, and really thank you for your partnership over the last 7 years.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Jim, that concludes my portion of the webinar today. Take it from here, sir.
Thank you, Andy. Yep. So we have a few questions that have been posed, and I won't tee these up specifically to a person unless their name is called out. So a general one maybe for the clients. What, if any, internal political or technical struggles did you have to navigate from your side during your integration project?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll jump in there. I guess without getting too far into the weeds, I guess my recommendation is to try and get as much collaboration to avoid that as possible. Early and often, I guess, as far as make sure you've got proper buy-in before you even get into the project. Make sure you have very good communication during the project. And then even afterwards, make sure you're constantly getting feedback on a reoccurring basis. I think I know where you're going with that question, and I would just say try and proactively avoid those situations as much as you can.
Great, thanks, Mark. This one might be for Andy. After a partner has delivered an integration solution and the client is on their own, what are some of the issues or situations they typically run into?
Oh, that is a deep question, Jim. Some of the issues and situations they run into. There was a slide earlier in the presentation before we launched into talking to Mark and Joyce here. I think there were 7 major topics that typically will surface up during an integration effort. One of the big ones is exceptions. So during the design process, everyone involved, DemandChain, our clients, everyone, we do a best effort to catch all of the possible exceptions. We architect and engineer these integrations to have fault paths so the users aren't negatively impacted. But inevitably, something's going to happen, right? Those of you who might be a little more technical or have been involved in integration projects are hopefully are nodding your head up and down going, yep. That's probably one of the bigger ones. One other one is that it's less of an issue today, really, if we're talking about consuming services like the U.S. Postal Service or FedEx or even an address validation service. But for clients that have on-site platforms or niche platforms that are either managed internally or managed by a third party, sometimes upgrades happen or a internet pipe gets swapped out or there's just something unexpected that happens. So really my babbling back to the answer to the question more directly, Jim, there's the unexpected that happens. That's one of the bigger pieces that comes in. The only non-unexpected piece that I would want to draw attention to is through change management. When you're launching an integration as part of a larger project, you're obviously training and you're obviously testing and you're doing change management inside your organization. Your employees are all well-intentioned, but in the heat of a direct phone call from a customer or something like that, sometimes if there's a hiccup, they may not remember, they may have written it down and forget to flag it forward, or they quickly, the worst case, they quickly do a workaround and share it with the rest of the team. And it doesn't float back up to anyone on the project team or the change control board or anybody until it's already proliferated. So there's a little bit of damage control to do around backing out an issue and getting it to work correctly and getting that user adoption and trust back up. So, kind of those 2 major areas, unexpected upgrades, internet hiccups, things like that. And then always monitor the users, do surveys, like active surveys after you launch it out. Make sure that you have your super users actively asking people how things are going, and create an environment where issues are rewarded to be brought forward. So that's kind of those two areas. How's that, Jim?
That certainly works for me, Andy. Okay, this one probably posed to Joyce and or Mark. From your experience, if you had a chance to do things over again, were there any key lessons learned that you might approach it a little differently, or a warning to people who might be on the call about be sure to consider this?
I can go first on that, I guess. You know, the one thing I would say is when we started this, we had a really big scope. I think the thing, you know, we wanted not only to do the recruiting engine, but do a lot of business management and kind of process management in the system. And if there's anything, I think we got the recruiting side really good, and it was the most critical. So we put a lot of attention there. And the business process side, I think we had to do more iteration there, and maybe we overcomplicated things in some ways, and focused on trying to gather all information in the system related to that versus the most important information in the system.
Great. Mark, anything from your end?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, the thing I would add is I think probably, you know, this is coming at the time I was on the IT side, on the project management piece. I would just say to make sure, you know, you really, from the business side, you get the right people involved, in terms of kind of who's going to champion that project and kind of drive it from, you know, if you've got multiple business groups, just kind of the importance of making sure you've got the right fit, in terms of the project engagement from that business user who's driving it. You know, I think at least 2 out of our 3 projects we had, you know, very strong kind of partnership. You know, and really the third wasn't bad either. It just maybe was not quite as much driving the direction from the business side, and it was kind of more kind of letting kind of IT lead based on, you know, previous experiences and previous projects. But I'd really advise putting a lot of importance on getting the right person, you know, somebody who's comfortable with technology and, you know, has a good vision for where they want the project to go.
Thanks, Mark. That's really helpful. The next question touches a little bit on Cadence, probably for Andy. In addition to exception handling, are there any particular anti-patterns we should be aware of? For example, overusing real-time integrations when batch or near real-time will do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You kind of nailed the big one in the question. One of the biggest things that we hear, and as we're going through and doing like solution engineering as we're walking these type of projects, is with the advent of a lot of the new integration platforms like MuleSoft, Celico, Oracle Fusion, things like that, where we have enterprise service bus architecture, where we can bring response times directly to the user in a much more agile way, is real time gets popped in. I need somebody to real time know where everything is. So what we come back and challenge with is the difference between real time and near real time honestly can be the matter of 500 milliseconds and months of work and a lot of investment. One piece that we really hit on is again that near real time. If you think about it from an interface standpoint, I talked about good integrations, right? I mean, a real-time integration is good. On the flip side, on a direct live real-time integration, you're also directly coupling your systems together. As quickly as the user hits a button, in flow, the system is doing a direct pausing call out to get information directly back and bring it right back to that user within the button up press on the button, right? That's real time. Versus near real time, they press the button, they may see a spinner for a second or two, and then they get the data back. It's a very small nuance between the two, but again, the near real time allows us to handle a decoupled architecture. If there is an outage in the platform, if there's an internet sneeze somewhere, you've got a rep who's standing in the basement of a manufacturing facility trying to put CPQ together for a client that they're trying to sell them a bunch of stuff, and that few milliseconds pause and break between a real-time integration and a near real-time integration allows the system to recover from the unexpected and guide the user down a guided path. So that's probably one of the big pieces. Also, kind of along the same vein, if I'm looking at, I'll pick on manufacturing again, right? So in an ERP system, we have our customer master, our contact master, our product pricing master, order master, all of that's coming back in. When you get to large data volumes, this now I'm standing at the precipice of looking down into a large technical hole here, but when we're talking about large data volumes, specifically I'll pick on orders because that's probably the easiest to do here. Your ERP system, depending on how long it's been in play, could have millions or tens of millions of orders and an exponentially higher number of order line items. Look back 10, 15, 20 years into integration, what it meant to get that data from point A to point B to be referenceable was to physically copy the data using an ETL tool on a nightly basis or a periodic basis to replicate that data into all systems so you have access to it. So in that type of instance, we will challenge our clients to say, do we really need that data to be resident? What do we need to do with that data? Maybe we need to report on it. Okay. Maybe we need people to look at it. Okay. Maybe it needs to drive a few simple automations. Okay. What the greater integration today tools and platforms that are out there, as well as Salesforce itself, allows us to talk about virtual integrations, where in a, again, near real-time mode, where the user really doesn't notice it because it's just a little spinny on the screen for maybe a second or so, is Salesforce will reach out, grab the pertinent data for what the user is trying to look at, and then virtually bring it back to Salesforce so the user can see it, interact with it, work with it, and then when they move on to something else, the data is no longer in the system and is just disposed of. You're saving on drive space or in file or record space in Salesforce. You're saving on integration front to back timing. Instead of having a 5-hour job every night to go cycle through stuff, you're doing an all said and done, maybe second and a half virtual pull to your ERP system to surface that relevant data forward. So those are some challenging areas that we will get into with our customers to make sure it's the right thing at the right time with the right data. How's that, Jim?
That's great. Okay, our next question involves, I think, a reference to your boiling the ocean notion, Andy, and it revolves around phased approach. For both Mark and Joyce, you almost certainly had way more than you could hope to accomplish in the initial engagement. How did you go about parsing that out into meaningful value-added bites within your organization? How did you prioritize and define what would the first phase, second phase be?
You're testing my memory, but in our case, because it was our recruiting engine for running a test, and that test was, people showing up is how we delivered our product to our consumer. We spent a lot of time, I think, in planning and in sandbox phases before we went live, because the go live had to be air-free. Now, of course, it wasn't going to be air-free, but it had to function. We couldn't afford some downtime. I think we blocked, maybe gave DemandChain like 3 days where we didn't schedule a test over a 3-day period. But it was really more about, for us, a lot of planning, allowing time for planning and testing before we launched.
Great. Mark, anything to add on your end, or?
Yeah, I guess I'd say, it's probably a fairly common thing. You come into a project and you've got all these things you want to accomplish, whether it's, from the business side or IT or whatever, and you bring that to the table. We really relied on, DemandChain really to kind of help us during the project on what were the critical pieces that we had to have in each phase. And so it's kind of part of the deal with using a company like DemandChain. You kind of are contracting with them for their experience and their, kind of lessons learned from previous projects. And really that worked really well for us. You don't have to hit those pitfalls yourself. You're kind of relying on them to kind of provide their knowledge and expertise, maybe through previous hard knocks to kind of guide you. And it really worked out really well for us. So we were able to scale down. I remember a couple of projects where we pushed off certain things, we talked about it and yeah, we can wait on that. But really none of the phases we went live with anything where we were feeling like we really didn't get what we needed. So I just kind of defer to, the experts on your team from DemandChain on some of those decisions.
Great, Mark. That's really helpful. I'll put a quick call out. We've got just one question left here. If anyone wants to queue one up in the next minute or two, feel free. This one, I guess, maybe at Andy, but it could be the clients as well. Can you change an integration platform if you find after a few months that it's not meeting a certain need?
I'll take this one to start here. So the short answer is, of course. Now there are timing, cost, tech debt, there's a bunch of things you need to work through to do that. A lot of the approach that we take more up front is to try to, of course, lessen that possibility. But, sometimes reality happens. We get into we put something into the wild and an unexpected condition comes up. Or actually there was one time, I don't remember which platform it was, but they went through, the platform was actually acquired by another company like 6 months in to go live. And they increased the rate by 2x of the cost of the platform. And that was enough at the time to say, okay, we should look at something else. So that was, I remember that was one example that was probably 2-3 years ago. But again, short answer, yes. I would not take that lightly though. How's that?
That works. Good words of wisdom from a man who's experienced a lot of it. Okay. Well, that represents the wrap up of our questions section. I'd like to thank Andy, Joyce, and Mark for a very informative session. I got a lot out of it, and I'm sure our attendees did as well. Before closing things out, 2 quick things. A reminder that we'll be sending you the email later today with the link to the webinar and the short survey. Please take a couple minutes to share your feedback with us. And a quick teaser for our next webinar, which will be held in early December on the topic of CPQ, or Configure Price Quote. More to come on that soon. So thanks to everyone for attending today's session, and on behalf of our whole team, have a great day.